Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Kyle had rehearsed the words in his head 100 different times, but when he finally stood face to face with Holden outside the Abbott estate, the chilly Genoa city wind stole every strand of confidence he had been trying to hold together. His hands shook slightly as he shoved them into his jacket pockets, not for warmth but to keep Holden from noticing. Holden's expression was wary, a mixture of curiosity and mild frustration, as if he'd expected this conversation but hoped it wouldn't happen. Kyle had spent weeks trying to bury his guilt, pretending Claire's pregnancy was simply an unfortunate twist in the narrative of other people's lives. Yet every time he saw her hand drift protectively to her growing belly, he felt the truth pressing against his ribs like a secret determined to claw its way out. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and let out a shaky breath. Holden tilted his head slightly, his tone cautious. "You said you needed to talk. Is something wrong with Claire?" That question was enough to push Kyle over the edge emotionally, because everything was wrong. Not with Claire's health, thank God for that, but with the way the truth had been handled or rather avoided, since the night everything had changed between them. Kyle felt a burn behind his eyes, something dangerously close to tears, and swallowed hard. He looked away, his gaze drifting across the expansive lawn he had known his entire life, a lawn that seemed suddenly too open, too exposed for the conversation he was about to have. "I need to tell you something," Kyle muttered, his voice catching. "And you're not going to want to hear it." Holden folded his arms across his chest, bracing himself. Kyle's heart hammered, each beat urging him forward and backward at the same time. He wished, for a fleeting and cowardly moment, that anyone would interrupt them. But no one came. No footsteps, no voices. Just him, Holden, and a truth that could ruin everything. The night he needed to confess about replayed in Kyle's mind mercilessly. That night at the lake house, quiet, private, meant to be an evening of closure for Claire after the trauma she'd been through. She had felt guilty, unwanted, and completely unmoored. And Kyle, in his attempt to comfort her, had crossed a line he never meant to cross. They'd promised each other afterward that it was a one-time mistake, an emotional lapse in judgment fueled by vulnerability and unresolved pain. But mistakes didn't come with consequences this heavy, unless fate had a twisted sense of humor. Claire never intended to hide the truth. She genuinely didn't know at first. By the time she realized her pregnancy didn't align with the timeline she believed belonged to Holden, everything had become too complicated. Still, Kyle hadn't imagined he'd be the one to break the news. He looked back at Holden, who was starting to grow impatient. "Kyle, just say it," Holden pressed. "Whatever it is, dragging it out isn't helping." Kyle exhaled sharply, and his voice cracked. "It's about the baby." Holden's eyes narrowed, concern deepening. Kyle felt the words claw their way up his throat, his resolve crumbling as tears blurred his vision. "Holden, I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry. But the baby Claire is carrying, he's not yours." Holden stared at him, blinking once, twice, as if his brain refused to process the information. The silence that settled between them felt heavier than any confrontation Kyle had endured in his life. He could see the denial in Holden's eyes, the immediate instinct to reject anything that threatened the future he'd imagined. Holden laughed under his breath, but it wasn't humor. It was disbelief coated in growing anger. "That's not funny," he said quietly. "Tell me this isn't some sick attempt to test me." Kyle shook his head, tears spilling freely now. "I wish it wasn't true. I wish I didn't have to say any of this. But Claire found out. The timing, the medical tests. Everything pointed back to me." He dragged a trembling hand across his face. "I'm the biological father." The impact of those words seemed to crack something inside Holden. He staggered back a step as if physically struck. His jaw clenched and his breathing grew sharp and uneven. "You," Holden said, pointing at him with a shaking hand. "You've been lying to me. Both of you." Kyle opened his mouth to explain, about the confusion, the guilt, the fear, but Holden held up a hand. "No. Don't try to justify anything." His voice was thick with a mixture of heartbreak and rage. Kyle's chest tightened painfully. He'd expected anger. He knew Holden would feel betrayed. But the wounded expression on Holden's face, The raw devastation was far worse than the anger. It reminded Kyle of everything Holden had already endured. The chaos Claire's past had dragged him into. The way he had tried to be steady for her even when she doubted she deserved it. Holden had wanted to be the father to this baby. He had already imagined a life where he could step up, do right by Claire, build something lasting. Kyle took a step closer cautiously. Holden, please listen. I never wanted to hurt you. Neither did Claire. We didn't plan for that night to happen. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. And we were both ashamed. But hiding the truth can't continue. You deserve to know. Holden's voice trembled. A mistake? That's what you're calling it. His eyes glistened and he swiped at them angrily. I've been picturing a future with Claire. Supporting her. Raising that baby, protecting them. I was ready to fight for them. And the whole time you knew it wasn't my child. His voice cracked and he shook his head. I trusted you. Kyle's stomach twisted, and he felt himself start to crumble further. I know. And I don't deserve your trust. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I couldn't keep lying. The baby deserves honesty. Claire deserves honesty. You do too. He hesitated, voice dropping. I swear to you, I'm not proud of what happened. I'd take it back if I could. Holden let out a bitter sound. Half laugh, half sob. Doesn't matter. Doesn't change a damn thing. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing a few steps before turning back toward Kyle with a look that cut deeply. What now? Are you planning to raise the child? Are you and Claire getting together? What exactly am I supposed to do with this? The question struck Kyle hard because he didn't have a clear answer. He had barely begun processing what it meant to be a father again, especially after everything with Harrison and the custody battles that had already torn his life apart. Kyle had always imagined his next child would come in a moment of stability, in a moment of mutual love, not from one night of emotional chaos and confusion. I don't know yet, Kyle admitted, voice hoarse. Claire needs time. So do I. But I'm not going to abandon my child. I want to be there. I'm trying to figure out how. Holden's shock shifted into a cold, simmering fury. Of course you do, he said sharply. Typical Abbott. Make a mess and then step in like a hero when it's too late. The jab stung, even though Holden probably didn't mean it as deeply as it landed. Kyle lowered his head, taking the accusation silently because part of him felt it was deserved. For several long moments, neither of them spoke. The winter air felt thick, almost suffocating. Holden's shoulders rose and fell with uneven breaths, and Kyle felt his own chest ache with the weight of everything unraveling. Finally, Holden spoke again, voice quieter but no less painful. You ruined everything I thought I had with her. There was no hatred in the statement, only heartbreak. And Kyle knew with devastating clarity that Holden wasn't wrong. Kyle stepped forward again, though his legs felt unsteady. I know you don't want to hear this right now, he said softly. But Claire truly cares about you. She wasn't trying to deceive you. She only found out recently and she's been terrified. Terrified of losing you. Terrified of hurting you. Terrified of what this means for all of us. Holden clenched his fists and looked away. Well, she succeeded. I'm hurt. His voice cracked on the last word, and he inhaled sharply, trying to regain control of his emotions. She should have come to me. You both should have. Kyle nodded, tears streaming down his face. You're right. And I've been a coward for waiting this long. But I'm here now. Whatever happens next, I'll accept it. Holden finally looked at him again, eyes red and swollen. Do you love her? The question hit Kyle like a punch. He didn't expect it. He didn't know how to answer it. Did he love Claire? He cared for her deeply. He respected her strength. He was emotionally tied to her in ways he didn't fully understand. But love? Kyle's hesitation said enough. Holden laughed softly, heartbreak etched into every sound. That's what I thought. He wiped his face and shook his head. I don't know how I'm supposed to look at either of you after this. Kyle felt something inside him fracture. He wanted to apologize again, to offer something that would ease Holden's pain, but he knew nothing would. The damage had already been done. I'm sorry, Kyle whispered, voice trembling. For everything. Holden took a step back, retreating. I need time, he said firmly. A lot of time. He began to walk away, his steps quick, uneven, as if each one carried the weight of betrayal and heartbreak he couldn't process. Kyle remained rooted where he stood, watching the man disappear down the driveway. He felt empty, hollowed out by the confession he had dreaded but could no longer avoid. The truth was out now. The consequences had begun. And nothing in Genoa City would be the same again. But even in his devastation, Kyle knew this was only the beginning. Holden would eventually go to Claire. Claire would have to face the fallout. And Kyle, whether ready or not, would have to figure out how to become a father again under circumstances more complicated than he had ever imagined. His tears finally subsided, but the ache remained, sitting deep in his chest like a bruise that would take far too long to heal. He turned toward the house, inhaling shakily. Whatever happened next, Kyle understood that honesty had been the only path forward, even if it left everything shattered in its wake. He walked through the doors of the Abbott home, unaware of the storm that was just beginning to form around all of them, a storm that would test loyalties, love, forgiveness, and every truth they thought they knew. The oppressive silence in the grand foyer of the Chancellor Mansion seemed to thicken with each passing second, broken only by the soft, rhythmic ticking of the ornate grandfather clock that had witnessed generations of secrets and scandals. Holden McNeil stood by the cold, marble fireplace, his posture rigid, his gaze fixed on the dying embers of a fire that had long since failed to warm the room. He had come seeking answers, drawn by the unspoken tension that had coiled itself around his wife, Claire, a tension that had become a palpable third presence in their home. Kyle Jenkins was perched on the edge of a velvet settee, looking as though he wished he could sink into its depths and disappear entirely. His hands, usually so animated and confident, were clenched together in his lap, the knuckles white with the strain of holding something monstrously heavy inside. He had asked Holden to meet him here, in this neutral yet intimidating space, under the vague pretense of discussing a new business venture, but the charade had evaporated the moment Holden walked in, replaced by a dread so profound it seemed to suck the very air from the room. Kyle's eyes, red-rimmed and shadowed by sleepless nights, kept darting towards Holden before skittering away, unable to bear the weight of the man's quiet, trusting expectation. "I don't even know where to begin," Kyle finally whispered, the sound raw and torn, scraping against the quiet hum of the mansion. He cleared his throat, a futile attempt to dislodge the emotion lodged there. "Everything I've practiced saying. It all sounds so hollow now. So inadequate." Holden remained silent, a patient statue, but a flicker of concern, or was it the first faint tremor of suspicion, crossed his features. He had known Kyle for years, had considered him a friend, a brilliant and sometimes troubled young man whom he had mentored and supported. He saw the storm of anguish on Kyle's face, and felt a protective instinct warring with a slow, creeping chill. "It's about Claire," Kyle forced out, the name hanging between them like a shard of glass. Holden's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, a slight straightening of the shoulders, a readiness to defend, to protect. "Is she all right? Is something wrong with the baby?" The hope, the pure, unadulterated joy that always infused Holden's voice when he spoke of his wife's pregnancy, was a knife twisting in Kyle's gut. A sob, harsh and unexpected, ripped itself from Kyle's chest, and he doubled over, his face buried in his hands. His shoulders shook with the force of his grief, a silent, racking earthquake of remorse. "She's fine. The baby is healthy," he managed to choke out between gasps. That's not it." The relief on Holden's face was brief, quickly replaced by a deeper, more profound confusion. He took a hesitant step forward, his instinct to comfort warring with the growing unease. "Kyle, whatever it is, we can handle it. You're not alone in this. You have friends. You have family. We can get you help, whatever you're dealing with." The kindness in Holden's voice, the unwavering decency of the man, was the final cruel blow. It was a mirror held up to Kyle's own treachery, reflecting back a monstrosity he could no longer bear to see. "You don't understand," Kyle cried out, his voice rising to a desperate pitch as he lifted his tear-streaked face. "You're offering me help, and you don't even know. You can't possibly know what I've done. To you. To Claire. To everyone." He dragged his sleeves across his eyes, a childish gesture that belied the adult horror of his confession. That night, the launch party for the new Genoa City Press expansion. Months ago. Do you remember? You had to leave early for that emergency conference call with the Singapore investors. Holden nodded slowly, his brow furrowed in recollection. I remember. Claire was there. She told me she had a headache and left not long after I did. A cold, dead weight began to settle in the pit of Holden's stomach. He remembered feeling a pang of guilt for leaving Claire alone at a crowded event, remembered her being unusually quiet the next morning, attributing it to a lingering migraine. She was upset, Kyle whispered, his eyes glazed, lost in the memory. Really upset. You'd been so distant, so consumed with work for weeks. She felt alone. She was crying in one of the back offices and I found her. He swallowed hard, the memory a toxic brew of sympathy, opportunity, and his own deeply buried feelings for Claire that he had always tried to suppress. I was there for her. I listened. We talked for hours. And we had too much to drink. The champagne. And then the whiskey from your father's old decanter. He looked at Holden, his eyes pleading for some form of comprehension, for a shred of absolution that he knew, on a fundamental level, could never be granted. One thing just led to another. It was a mistake. A catastrophic, unforgivable mistake. It meant nothing. It was a moment of weakness, of profound stupidity, and we were both so horrified the next day, we swore we would never speak of it again. We agreed it would be our secret, a terrible stain we would bury forever. The air in the room seemed to solidify, becoming difficult to draw into his lungs. Holden stood perfectly still, his face a mask of dawning comprehension and utter devastation. The pieces were falling into a picture so grotesque, he could scarcely comprehend its shape. The timeline, Claire's subsequent joy at the pregnancy, the way she had glowed with a life they had both believed was a miracle born of their rekindled love after a period of strain. He took a stumbling step backward, his hand reaching out to brace himself against the cold mantelpiece, the solid marble the only real thing in a world that was suddenly tilting on its axis. No, he breathed, the word a mere exhale of disbelief. No, Kyle. You're not saying you can't be. I am the father, Kyle wept, the words finally irrevocably spoken aloud, shattering the last vestiges of the life Holden had believed he was living. The baby. Claire's baby, it's mine. The confession hung in the air. A vile, living thing that poisoned the very space between them. There was no sound for a long moment, no ticking clock, no rustle of fabric, only the deafening roar of a future being annihilated. Holden's face, once a canvas of kindness and quiet strength, crumpled. It was as if an internal structure, the very foundation of his soul, had given way. The color drained from his features, leaving behind a pallor of shock and immeasurable pain. He stared at Kyle, but he wasn't really seeing him. He was seeing the ghost of his wife in another man's arms. He was seeing the ultrasound picture tucked into his wallet. He was seeing the nursery they had just finished painting a soft, sunny yellow, a room that now felt like a shrine to a lie. A low guttural sound, something between a moan and a growl, escaped Holden's lips. He pushed himself away from the mantel, turning his back on Kyle, his entire body trembling with the force of the seismic shock. He ran a hand through his hair, gripping it tightly as if to physically anchor his reeling mind. The trust he had placed in Claire, his rock, his partner, felt like ash in his mouth. The paternal love that had already taken root in his heart for the child he believed was his own now felt like a foreign, invasive growth. A cruel joke played on him by the universe. And Kyle, his friend, the man he had vouched for, had brought into the fold, had trusted implicitly. This was the repayment. This was the legacy of their friendship. A betrayal so deep and personal it felt less like a wound and more like an amputation. All this time, Holden finally spoke, his voice a hollow, broken echo of its former self. He didn't turn around, speaking to the cold, unfeeling wall. All these months. You let me. You watched me. He couldn't finish the sentence. He couldn't give voice to the image of himself, beaming with pride, placing a protective hand on Claire's stomach, talking about names and futures, while Kyle, the real father, stood by and watched the performance, complicit in the deception. You watched me build my life on a foundation of quicksand, and you said nothing. You smiled, you shook my hand, you offered congratulations. The bitterness in his tone was corrosive. How could you? How could either of you? He spun around then, and the raw, naked agony in his eyes was more terrifying to Kyle than any outburst of rage could ever have been. I wanted to tell you, Kyle implored, rising to his feet, his own body shaking with the force of his desperation. 1,000 times, Holden, I swear to you. Every time I saw you with her, every time I saw the love in your eyes, I died a little inside. The guilt has been eating me alive. It's a cancer. But Claire, she was terrified. She was terrified of losing you, of destroying your family, of the scandal. She made me promise. She said it would ruin everything, that it was one night, one mistake, and that the baby deserved a father like you. A real father. The words, meant to explain, only served to deepen the cut. They highlighted the calculation, the prolonged, conscious decision to deceive him, to use his love and his name as a shield for their transgression. A real father? Holden repeated, the phrase a venomous sneer. And what does that make you, Kyle? The sperm donor? The biological footnote? Or are you just the dirty secret waiting in the wings? He took a step forward, and for a fleeting, terrifying moment, Kyle thought he saw violence flash in the older man's eyes, but it was quickly extinguished by a wave of overwhelming despair. Do you have any idea what you've done? This isn't just about a lie. This is about a life. A child who will one day ask questions. A child who will have my name but your blood. You've created a person whose very identity is founded on a secret. You've condemned an innocent baby to a life of potential confusion and heartache, because the two of you were too cowardly to face the consequences of your actions. He began to pace, a caged animal with no hope of escape. My marriage, he muttered, almost to himself. The life we built. It's all a fiction. A beautiful, perfect fiction that I was stupid enough to believe in. He stopped and fixed Kyle with a look of such profound disillusionment it was soul-scarring. I loved her. I loved that child with every fiber of my being. And now you tell me it's not mine to love? That it was never mine. The question was unanswerable. A philosophical and emotional abyss that threatened to swallow them both whole. The joy of impending fatherhood, which had been the one constant light in his life through recent professional struggles, had been revealed as a mirage, a cruel trick of the light. Kyle could only stand there, utterly defeated, the tears continuing their silent, relentless trek down his face. There were no more words of defense, no more excuses that could possibly hold any weight. He was a supplicant before the altar of his own ruin, and the God he had offended was turning away. I am so sorry, Holden, he whispered, the apology a pathetic, insignificant thing in the face of the cataclysm he had wrought. From the bottom of my soul, I am sorry. I would give anything to take it back.